You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Hello, welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm doing the intro today. It's usually Ty that does it. And we're joined by, as always, Brandon Walker. You can follow him at bwalkerthedon. And we have from the Locked On Ravens podcast, we have Kevin Oestreicher. How do you say your name? Sorry, I should have got your name before.
No, it's Oestreicher. Some people just say Ostrich, so I'm glad you at least gave it a try.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Kevin, for coming on again. This big Steelers the Steelers could make the playoffs. So can the Ravens, but the chances of it happening are pretty slim. What do you think about this upcoming game here? The Ravens had 5 straight losses, and they're starting Tyler Huntley again, and Jackson's out. Do you see do you like the move? Like, what's going on with Jackson right now? Like, do you think they sat him out because they don't think they're going to make the playoffs, or what do you think the whole idea of doing that is?
Yeah, well, Jackson actually suffered a bone bruise in his ankle in Week 14. So the last fully healthy game he played was in Week 13 against Pittsburgh at Heinz Field. So the whole notion behind Jackson and his injury is, it originally was thought to be an ankle sprain, which can be, depending on how severe it is, a bit easier to manage than bone bruises. But bone bruises are difficult injuries, and they kind of creep up on you, and the pain lingers a little bit. And I'm no doctor or anything, but for the way that Jackson has been rather healthy throughout his NFL career. He only missed 2 games before this stretch where he's missed. And both those games he missed earlier on in his career weren't because of injuries. The Ravens, they don't want to take any risks right now. And if Jackson was healthy enough to play and he felt good enough to play, he'd be out there. He's a player that really makes or breaks this team. And I'm not saying Tyler Huntley's a bad player, because I think he is like one of the more perfect backups in the league for a Lamar Jackson type player with his skill set and everything. But for now, it is, and it has been, the Tyler Huntley or Josh Johnson show, as we saw in Week 16 against Cincinnati. But Huntley will be tasked with, you mentioned the Ravens can make the playoffs. They first have to take care of their business against the Steelers and then rely on teams like the Jaguars to help them get in.
All right. What do you think about the Baltimore's running game without Jackson, and how do you feel about him being a running quarterback? Because you similarly said they have the same skill set. Yeah,
well, the run game this year has been not what many have been accustomed to in the Lamar Jackson era. I mean, this team lost J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards before the season started, and that was a huge blow already. So they've been relying on Latavius Murray, who hasn't done a ton this season. Devonta Freeman started off slow, and to Freeman's credit, he's actually been pretty good over the back half of the season here. But they had Le'Veon Bell, who is no longer with the team. He's now in Tampa with Tom Brady. And then they tried a couple of other young running backs, and that just hasn't worked out for them. They're missing guys on the offensive line. Lamar Jackson, to this day, is still their leading rusher, and he has the most attempts, most yards, and et cetera. And in terms of what my thoughts are of him as a running quarterback, I think his legs add a dynamic to his game that you don't really see from many. There are a few, but Jackson is a dynamic talent in his own right. And, people will say, what about the injury risk? And what about, does it worry you that he takes too many hits? And in his rookie season, Jackson had to learn pretty quickly that, he can't be fighting for an extra yard at the expense of a massive hit from a safety coming down or something. He has learned to get out of bounds. The play he got injured on against the Browns was not because he was running. He was escaping the pocket because the offensive line could not block. And Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a rookie for the Browns, ended up stepping on his ankle or falling on his ankles pretty awkwardly, and that's how he got injured. So in terms of the notion of him being running quarterback, I have no problems with it. I think it adds to his game. He is a good thrower. He is a good runner, and that makes him, in my opinion, one of the better quarterbacks in the league.
All right, I'm going to follow up with that one. I'm sorry. But how do you think that's going to affect his contract negotiations, how much they pay him? Is it a matter of the money, or is it going to be the years because of the injury risk?
Right. Well, the thing that surprised me about that situation was actually, and this is a whole NFL perspective, is that Josh Allen was the first quarterback to sign. I thought it would have been Jackson. And in terms of what it's going to be like with the injury risk. I don't necessarily think Baltimore is looking in that direction, but the arguments that have been made by a couple of people, and it's an interesting debate, is the fact that, this is a what have you done for me now lately league, and the fact that, your latest performances are what people remember the most about you. And before getting injured, Lamar Jackson admittedly struggled very badly ever since week 10 by the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. He got injured, and that's the lasting image that people have of him. So people are saying, well, he lost contract leverage, and he's losing himself money because of that. I have no doubt that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson want this partnership to continue, and I think that they will get a deal done. They've been very open about the fact that they both want a deal to get done, and that would be their preference. But now it comes down to, are you paying Lamar Jackson $30 million a year, 35, 40, 45? I don't think he's getting the Mahomes money type deal right now. Mahomes winning a Super Bowl contributed a lot to getting that big, massive uptick in contract. And the Super Bowl is the Ravens know with Joe Flacco gets you a lot of money added onto your contract. Jackson, it's seeming, the Ravens have a small chance in the playoffs, but it doesn't seem like they're winning it this year unless they get some magic. And who knows, maybe it happens. But for now, it seems like Jackson is probably in the, Josh Allen, maybe Dak Prescott, even what Deshaun Watson got, is somewhere in that range. But I think with the injuries that you're talking about, sure, maybe they'll look at it, but I don't think it's going to be a huge factor for them because they know that Jackson, and I think they know that Jackson is the guy they want leading their team for years to come.
And the Ravens wide receivers, they've regressed in recent weeks, but Mark Andrews has been going off. He's one of the best tight ends. Is that because of Jackson's been out, or why have the receivers been struggling? And just talk a little bit about Andrews, his high level play lately.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the receivers dating back 8, 10, however many years has been a pretty big weakness for the Ravens. You can talk about some of their failed draft picks, such as Rashad Perriman. If you want to go really far back, Mark Clayton, and then some of the veterans. They tried Michael Crabtree, Des Bryant had a couple nice flashes last season, but they now have a very deep receiver room. Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman. They actually had to make James Prochet inactive coming off a 7-catch, 76-yard performance, which actually put some of the Baltimore community in a bit of an uproar. But Andrews is the Ravens' best receiver, pass-catching weapon right now. He's one of the best tight ends in the league, and he's been playing like the best tight end in the NFL over the past month because what he brings is a security blanket. And Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson have established chemistry. And right as Tyler Huntley stepped in, it became the security blanket. All right, I trust you to catch the football. I'm going to throw it to you 10 times a game. And now Mark Andrews is the all-time Ravens receiving yard leader in a single season. So he has now gotten to that point. And part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that for the Ravens, defenses have to give more attention to other weapons. I mean, you have Marquise Brown or Rashad Bateman. Last year, you could double, triple team Mark Andrews and double cover Marquise Brown and say, all right, go beat us with Des Bryant or Willie Snead or something. But now there are a bunch of those other weapons. So in terms of, some of the struggles the Ravens offense has gone through, it's purely, I think, lack of personnel, some poor execution, and some play calling in there. All that combined has really hurt the Ravens. The red zone offense has been one of the best in the league this season. But for example, against the Rams, they can't score a touchdown the entire game. They have to rely on 4 field goals by Justin Tucker and a defensive touchdown by Chuck Clark. So I've been impressed with Andrews. I've been impressed with the passing game overall. But in a Lamar Jackson era where I think Ravens fans have gotten used to the Ravens putting up 30, 40 points a game, we're now seeing these 14, 21, 20-point outings, and it's just not what people have been used to.
Well, all right. I think part of the issue may be the offensive line, who's allowed 54 sacks, which is a league high. So how do you feel about it? Is it injuries? I know Ronnie Stanley's been out, and is replacement Villanueva. Do you think he'll be back next year, or do you think they're just going to move on in a different direction?
For Villanueva, I think they're probably going to move on. I know a lot of Steelers fans are familiar with the play of Alejandro Villanueva, and I saw many that were rejoicing when he signed with the Ravens. And he's been inconsistent, I'd say, this season. He's been great in the locker room. On the field, his play has been very, very up and down. People are saying, he's good for 1 penalty a game at least. And there's a viral video of, I think it was the Chiefs game. He was trying to club, I think, Frank Clark and just chop down and let Frank Clark run by him. And I think with what the Ravens need right now, one, it's better offensive line plays. You mentioned that league high in sacks is just not going to get it done. But two, they need salary cap, and Villanueva can save him a bit of money if he's not on the team next year. The Ravens have Juwan James, who they signed after he tore his Achilles in Denver, and the Broncos ended up cutting him. He hasn't played all season, but they like him as a right tackle prospect. And I think many people forget that the Ravens signed Villanueva to play right tackle before Ronnie Stanley ended up getting injured. So once he got injured, they moved him back over to the left side, which is where he played in Pittsburgh. So I think that for Villanueva, I'd be a little surprised if he was back. I just think the money is not worth having a guy who might not even be starting next season. He'd be great depth, but not at the price he's currently at. I'd view him more as a backup in this league at this point, maybe a low-end starter on a team. But I think for what the Ravens need, they've been missing Ronnie Stanley a ton. They traded the bookend tackles they had in Stanley and Orlando Brown Jr. are both gone from what they had in 2020. So they've been working with new guys, putting new guys in. They've had a kind of rotating door at left guard. So that's contributed to it. And I think that that's part of the reason why you could say the Ravens offense, especially with Lamar Jackson out, has been struggling a little bit.
You think they missed Orlando Brown?
I think they do. I mean, the Brown situation was one that I don't think many have seen before, because Brown didn't request a trade because he was unhappy in Baltimore. He just wanted to play left tackle. And he knew that he wasn't going to get that opportunity with Ronnie Stanley. And now what you see is Stanley's been out for almost the entire season. And if you had a guy like Orlando Brown to plug into that spot instead of Alejandro Villanueva, I think things would have been a lot different. Maybe, with all the injuries they've had this year, you can point to a lot of different positions and say, well, this and that and the other. But I think that, there's reasons to think that the Ravens are missing Orlando Brown. I think it'd be kind of crazy if they weren't, especially in a year that they were almost doing a semi-rebuild of their offensive line. They signed Kevin Zeitler. They moved Bradley Bozen over to center. So they were doing that whole rebuild thing. Not a lot of guys who had familiarity with this offense. So Orlando Brown struggled to start the season, has been playing a lot better over the second half of the year at left tackle. So, yeah, I think that they do miss him. But the fact does remain that he would not be playing left tackle in Baltimore, and he does not have that position if Ronnie Stanley is healthy. And when Stanley comes back, I believe he will be fully healthy next season. The Ravens will just be in the same situation, and Brown probably would have left him for agency.
And do you think TJ Watt's going to break Strahan's single season sack record on Sunday? Do you think he'll get 1.5 sacks against that Ravens offensive line?
I think I'm going to say he will. I'm saying he's going to get 2 and kind of just break the threshold, which I know that's all he needs. But going up against Villanueva, it depends where he's lined up on the field, because to Patrick McCary's credit, he's one of the better right tackles in the NFL this season. But TJ Watt has just been a monster, not just the season, for his entire career. And going up against Villanueva, who I did mention has been playing pretty inconsistently, the Steelers can kind of move Watt around to where they feel like his skill set can be maximized. And I think that if he's lined up on Villanueva all game, he'll at least get some pressures and probably break that sack record too. And for a guy that's been so dominant over his NFL career, and now we see that all coming to, a head here where he's on track to break the sack record. And the final boss for him is a former Steeler and Alejandro Villanueva. So we'll see how that turns out.
And the Ravens run defense currently ranks number 1 in the league. And Najee Harris had 188 yards rushing against the Browns on Monday night. How do you think the Ravens run defense will do against Najee Harris on Sunday? They did pretty well the first time they met.
Yeah, I'm expecting a pretty solid performance by the Ravens on the ground. Their run defense, as you talked about, has been the best in the league this season. I think that they performed really well. They've been missing Derek Wolfe all year, who was their best run defender, arguably, in 2020. So it's been even more impressive. But, the Steelers' offensive line has struggled a bit this season, as I know many Steelers fans are aware of. And, I don't think that takes away from what Najee Harris is or will become as a player. I think he's a phenomenal young talent. But you got Calais Campbell in there for the Ravens. Brandon Williams has been playing great football over the second half of the season. Definitely struggled in the first half, but it honestly might have been due to an injury where he missed a couple of games there. Just a matter of BK, Broderick Washington. They have the defensive line depth, the front 7 depth to, I think, take Najee Harris out of the game and force the Steelers to rely on the arm of Ben Roethlisberger and Chase Claypool in that passing offense to really do their damage. And I think that's one of the definite keys for this defense is make the Steelers offense one-dimensional and take the run game out of the equation so you can focus more resources on trying to stop Ben Roethlisberger in that passing game.
Okay, what about their edge rusher, their pass rush? You got Owe, the rookie, doubtful for this game. How do you think they're gonna try to bring the heat for Ben one last time?
Yeah, I think it could be a big Justin Houston game for the Ravens, and just trying to be creative with the blitzes. Don Martindale is one of the most exotic blitzers in the entire NFL, and they have the edge rush talent. Afe Owe, is probably not going to play in this one, and that's a big loss for him. Owe's been pretty good over the course of his rookie year, but Justin Houston has been, I think, the veteran that many wanted in Baltimore in that group. They have a couple other guys too, like Jalen Ferguson hasn't really shown a ton in Baltimore, but they could, send delayed blitzes with corner blitzes off the edge, up the middle pressure with Patrick Queen and Josh Bynes. I think the Ravens are going to get creative with it to try to bring down Ben Roethlisberger, but as Roethlisberger has shown over the course of his career, he does not go down easy. I remember countless plays, the Terrell Suggs, Ben Roethlisberger rivalry has been played up a bunch this week, and I remember just that one incompletion he had. I can't remember the year, can't remember the week, but where Suggs was pawing at the football, Ben Roethlisberger shoves him off of him, tosses it away. It's those types of plays that have made Ben Roethlisberger's career, just throwing defenders off of him. So even if the Ravens have him dead to rights, you can never count out Ben to make a play happen. And even if this is his last game, I mean, I'm not counting him out in that situation either.
And the Ravens, we got the Away is being he's doubtful. That's who do you think the Ravens who would step up as edge rushers then?
Yeah, probably Houston, probably Ferguson. The Ravens have Dalen Hayes on injured reserve. You could see a bit of Pernell McPhee in there as well, and I think Tyus Bowers is a huge key for them. He's been playing great football. The duo of him and Houston have been, I think, a lot. I don't want to say a lot better because I think people were expecting a lot, but they have been great this year. They made a play together in the Rams game in Week 17 where Bowser ends up getting the football. Houston ends up recovering it. And that's the type of duo that the Ravens have been missing for a little while. I mean, at one point, this team had Terrell Suggs, Matthew Judon, and Zadarius Smith all on the same team together rushing the passer. And, now all three of those guys are gone. Well, Suggs is coming back to be the legend of the game. But I think, for the Ravens, it'll be a key for Houston and Bowser to step up with other contributions also.
All right, the Ravens have struggled a lot in their secondary. Marlon Humphreys has been out. Marcus Peters, amongst other pieces with injuries. What do you think about their struggles right now, and how do you think they're going to hold up on Sunday?
Yeah, it's been tough all year for the Ravens. A bottom 5 pass defense this year. In a lot of categories. And you mentioned it has to do with Marlon Humphrey being out. Marcus Peters has been lost for the whole season. He hasn't played a snap. Deshaun Elliott, their starting safety, was lost midway through the season. At one point in Week 16 against the Bengals, the Ravens had 0 cornerbacks healthy from their initial 2021 depth chart. Everybody was either out with COVID, suffered an injury in the middle of the game, or was on injured reserve. Tavon Young came back into that game, but that's who I'm looking at. I'm looking at Tavon Young to really be the anchor of this pass defense. You have Chuck Clark as well, who had 2 interceptions in Week 17, after a ton of dropped ones. I'm glad he got his hands on a couple, but the pass defense is hurting. And I think that's another reason why it's so important to stop the Pittsburgh run game, because if Pittsburgh is beating the Ravens with play action and the Ravens have to worry about play action, saying, oh, is Najee Harris going to get the ball, or is Ben going to pull it in and find Chase Claypool? You have a bunch of those options there. And I think that's why it's important to stop the Pittsburgh run game. So in terms of their secondary, they've had to rely on guys like Geno Stone, who's a second-year player. They've had to rely on guys like Anthony Averett, who has also been injured himself, and other guys like Brandon Stevens, who played running back in high school in his first 2 years of college, transferred to SMU, became a cornerback, and is now playing safety at the NFL level in his rookie season. So I think that the struggles have largely come from injuries and just having to play a different game on defense than they've been used to all season, because the loss of Peters outright just by himself was huge. And now they've had to deal with countless other ones.
Yeah. And, the Steelers, their passing game hasn't really been doing well. I think Roethlisberger, his most passing yards the last three games was 175 yards. So, their passing attacks really like Deontay Johnson's really their only true productive receiver. And he got activated to off the reserve COVID-19 list today. So he should play on Sunday. So who do you think will match up with Johnson as a cornerback for the Ravens? And have you watched any of the Steelers passing game the last 3 weeks? It's been pretty bad. want to know how do you think they'll match up against the Ravens pass defense, who's also have their issues.
Right. Well, usually in this situation, I say, Marlon Humphrey might travel with the best guy, but they don't have that. So, I think if Johnson lines up in the slot the majority of the snaps this week, he'll be with Tavon Young. I would probably anticipate Jimmy Smith getting some time on Chase Claypool because just the physical nature of both players, wide receiver, corner. And then you have other pass catchers that can do some damage. So the key is going to be Deontay Johnson. And with the Ravens and what they have done is they have focused attention on the best receiver on the team. Devontae Adams, they literally were putting 2 guys on him every single play with help over the top and whatnot. Cooper Kupp, they were doing a little bit of the same thing sometimes. But for Johnson, I would not be surprised if Baltimore shifted their attention over there, kind of let the other matchups play out and put safety up over the top with him. But Johnson is a technician, is a route runner, beats you on slants, beats you on outs, beats you on everything. He can do a lot with how good his footwork is. His hands have been questionable over the course of his career, but I still think that he can get open with ease. And against Ravens corners that are not Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, I think that's where you got to shift your attention to.
All right, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact for the Ravens, and what's your biggest concern on Sunday?
Yeah, so for the Ravens, I think the biggest impact player is probably going to be Mark Andrews. He has been for the Ravens over this past month, and I don't think that's going to change here. Even if the Steelers put a lot of attention on him, which I expect they will, I think he can still beat a ton of different types of linebackers. And with the Steelers having, some struggles at the position over the course of the season, I think that Andrews could have a huge game. And my concerns, a couple of them, one is the pass defense. I know the Pittsburgh pass offense has not been amazing over the past couple of weeks here, but the Ravens pass defense, that's going to be one area for them where they will have to play well. Another one, I think they have to get off to a fast start. They have done a better job at doing that over the last month or so, 3 weeks or so, but that doesn't mean that they can stop. And I think that if they can get off to a fast start, that's key for them. And also some red zone offense. They need to have better red zone offense than they had in week 17. They went 0 for 2. They did not score a touchdown, and they left anywhere from 6 to 10 points on the board and a 1-point loss. So it's those types of plays where in rivalries like this, Ravens and Steelers, we know that you throw the records out the window, you throw everything that's happened out the window, and these two teams play hard-fought, physical, intense, close games, and I think it's going to be another one of those on Sunday.
And Kevin, do you have a prediction for the game?
I think that with all the Ravens have gone through this season, with the 5-game losing streak they are on, they want to end it on a high note, and not to mention that they want to send Ben Roethlisberger out of M&T Bank Stadium with a loss. And I know the Steelers fans and Steelers Nation wants to have Ben Roethlisberger win that game. So what I'm going to go here is I'm going to say it's a 3-point Ravens win. This is a game where it's, again, close, hard-fought, physical, intense. But I'm gonna call it down to a Justin Tucker difference and say that this game is won on the foot of Justin Tucker. And what could be a low-scoring game, it could be a defensive battle, as I know in these AFC North matchups, some of them at least we've seen. And for Pittsburgh and Baltimore, with Terrell Suggs coming back as a legend of the game, you can't really set it up any better. So now it's up to the Ravens to do their job and take care of their business. And I'm going to put confidence in them one last time here and say they will.
Okay. All right, Ben's last game. Well, everything comes full circle in life, don't it, Kevin?
It does.
I remember in 2004, I was a senior in high school. Little known prospect out of Miami, Ohio, stepped into where? M&T Bank Stadium to go and play against the Ravens. Baltimore won that game. That was the only game the Steelers lost all year until they ran into the Patriots. But anyway, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about it? Are you going to be at the game on Sunday?
I don't think I'm going to be at the game. I've actually been a little under the weather recently, so I'm not trying to play with any of that. But with what Ben Roethlisberger has meant to the rivalry, I mean, the Ravens players have been talking about it, all week. And Jimmy Smith said, it's going to be an end of an era. When Terrell Suggs left the rivalry, it kind of marked that as well, because it's been Ben and Terrell Suggs is kind of the two players in this. And there have been others. I mean, there are so many memories I can look back on. The Hines Ward hit on Ed Reed, the Christmas Day game where You have Antonio Brown reaching out, Ben Roethlisberger breaking his nose, and the Bart Scott hit, and Rashard Mendenhall breaking a bone in his rookie season. There's so many, but Ben Roethlisberger on the football field in this rivalry has been a player who has caused the Ravens fans and Ravens Nation a lot of pain, and somebody who has caused them a lot of joy in different situations. There have been triumphant wins and defeating losses and just all these different plays where now you're looking ahead to the future without a Ben Roethlisberger in this rivalry. Is it going to be Mason Rudolph? Is it going to be a veteran? Is it going to be a rookie who steps in next season? And any one of those players, it's just going to have a different type of feel to it. I don't think the rivalry goes away because Ben Roethlisberger isn't there. I mean, this is a rivalry that's going to go on for could be all eternity because it's just the moments it's had and the moments it's going to have. And looking back on all those different memories that I have had watching Ben Roethlisberger play, whether it is lining up against Terrell Suggs or even this year where, not a lot of players remain from back in the day in that Ravens-Steelers rivalry. It's another player in Ben Roethlisberger who's exiting and another chapter ends, but at the same time, you have another one beginning and we'll see how good that one is.
I think he's the last guy left. He's the last man standing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there are a couple. I have to think.
I'm sorry. I count the times when they played in 2008 and 2010. That's when I counted. I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't been as good since then, but that's the rivalry, Ravens Steelers, I remember. I remember in Jamal Lewis running over Joey Porter. And then on the next possession, Bettis running over Ray Lewis. I remember that. I was in 04. It was about 03 or 04, one of the years.
Right. I think the only player for the Ravens is it might be Sam Cook, their punter. That might be the only one.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're right.
Kevin, do you remember that game from 2004 when Maddox got injured, Tommy Maddox got injured, and Ben Roethlisberger came in?
Oh no, I was too young to remember that. I'm a younger guy.
Okay.
My memories of this rivalry, that's one that's kind of just outside of my pay grade. But overall, for what this team has gone up against in Pittsburgh for years and years and years, I mean, that's like one of the first things I learned about this team was, whenever Steelers week comes around, you hate the color yellow and, you renegade and everything about what the Steelers team is. And I remember there was it was a mic'd up clip that they had Ed Reed at practice. I think it was 2019 and it was Steelers week. And he came in, talked to the team about the importance of the week. And there was a player who was simulating, I think it might've been Jalen Samuels actually. And he looked at the guy in the Steelers uniform. The guy was simulating Jalen Samuels, and he went, "I still hate that color." It's those types of moments and those types of things you're kind of instilled with as a young person, and even for these players as a young player, where you're like, you know what? It's almost rare to see a player go from the Ravens to the Steelers to the Ravens. I mean, Chris Wormley's there in Pittsburgh now, who is a former Raven, but you have those moments in the rivalry that are intense and insane. And, I'll never forget those for as long as I live.
Yeah. I read an article. I saw it on Twitter. It's from Press Box. I think it's a Raven or Baltimore site, but they interviewed cornerback Gary Baxter, who he was the cornerback that blitzed on that play and injured Tommy Maddox's, I think it was his right elbow. And he kind of talked about how, he injured Maddox and Roethlisberger was eventually going to start anyway that season. But, they went on and run, like, as Brandon mentioned, 115-1 that season. But, it's definitely, it's the end of a long chapter here with Roethlisberger against the Ravens. How did the Ravens set that up for Suggs? Did they know, this is probably going to be Roethlisberger's last game and they're going to honor him there in Baltimore on Sunday?
I'd be shocked if there wasn't a little preparation in planning beforehand. I mean, those two, they're all the quotes between them. They respect each other. I don't think they like each other still. It's still something where, those are two players who, when you look back at Ravens Steelers in this era and even the previous era in the rivalry, you look at those plays of Suggs crushing Roethlisberger and Roethlisberger throwing off Suggs, and those two went at it for years and years and years, and bringing Suggs back for what likely is Ben Roethlisberger's last game, coming full circle. is a moment in a game that I don't think many will forget. And I know the scene at Heinz Field after Pittsburgh's Week 17 game is one that many won't forget, as he took the lap around the field and, was high-fiving all the fans. And, Pittsburgh is sending out their quarterback the way that I think they should. And now the Ravens have a job to do, and that's send out Pittsburgh's quarterback the way they think they should, and that's with the loss. So that's their goal. That's what's on their mind. And with Suggs coming back, it'll definitely add an extra layer and some extra energy to that stadium on Sunday.
And the Steelers, to make the playoffs, they have to beat the Ravens, and they have to hope for the, out of all teams, the Jaguars to beat the Colts. And then there's also a scenario where they have to hope that the Raiders and Chargers don't tie on Sunday Night Football because they will have the tiebreaker.
And the Dolphins lose.
No. It's just
no. It's actually in the scenario. I don't know how, because the Dolphins has been eliminated. I don't.
No, I don't think the Dolphins
said it on the.
What I read was that they needed just those three because the Dolphins, they have 8 losses.
Right.
So the Steelers, if the Steelers win their next 2 games, or if they win, they'll be 9-7-1.
Right. Yeah, but all this depends on the Jaguars. And last time their fans are going to be dressing up as clowns. Is that the organization that you depend on for us as fans to put your hat on?
Yeah, I mean, so what I was going to ask was, what do the Ravens need to get to the playoffs? And do you think they're going to show the scores on the scoreboard? Because I know last time when the Steelers, was 2019, they needed some help to make it. And the Ravens, they already clinched everything. So they didn't have the score on the scoreboard. So what do you think is going to happen there? And what are the Ravens' playoff scenarios?
Yeah, the Ravens are very similar to Pittsburgh. This is an elimination game pretty much, right? Because even if, the Jaguars lose, which it's the Jaguars, so we'll see. The Ravens, if they lose to the Steelers, they're out. There's no way they can get in. Same thing with the Steelers. This is an elimination game for the Ravens, and they are relying on the Jaguars. And they have a couple former Ravens in that organization. You have Jihad Ward, and you have Joe Cullen, who's a defensive coordinator, and also Zach Orr, who's a linebacker coach there. He's a defensive coach. But, yeah, the Ravens will be looking at that Colts game. Calais Campbell said that he'll be watching the scoreboard if it's up there. And then the wacky thing is, the whole thing of the Chargers and Raiders tie, then they both make the playoffs, or that whole crazy scenario. So the Ravens situation is very similar to Pittsburgh. And I think it kind of adds an extra layer because both teams have something to play for. This is not like one team's already out of it and they're like, let's tank for a better draft pick. Neither of these teams are going to be tanking on Sunday. They're going to go all out here. And I think that's how it should be, especially because even though the playoff hopes are slim, the Ravens, they're around, I believe, 3.5% right now to make the playoffs. That's better than 0. And even if it is not 0, they still have a chance to do it. So that's where I am with that.
Yeah, I think the Steelers' chance are like at 5% or something. I'd be absolutely shocked if the Jaguars beat the Colts, on Sunday, even though that the Colts haven't beat the Jaguars in Jacksonville since 2014 somehow. But just a last question here for me, at least. With the Ravens losing 5 straight games, what's the feeling with the fan base in Baltimore right now about? Are they thinking, Jackson's, the defense? I know the past secondary has been struggled, and not having Lamar Jackson definitely hurts also.
Right. I think the mood, or at least I can share my mood, is that I'm in shock that the Ravens are in this situation right now. And I think a lot of people in Baltimore they put themselves in a good enough position at 8-3 to make the playoffs. All they really had to do was win one of their 5 games that they have lost, and they would have put themselves in most likely a win-and-in scenario in this game against Pittsburgh, which I think is what they wanted to have happen. But they have not been able to take care of their business. The injuries have piled up. The COVID outbreak came at a very inopportune time. In the biggest game of the year against Cincinnati, they were starting Josh Johnson, who had been with the team for just over a week. And so I think for a lot of people in Baltimore right now, they understand the scope of just what has happened this season with the injuries. And they understand that, there was a ton of magic that happened in the first part of the year. John Harbaugh got his team ready to play, and they were at 8-3, the number 1 seed in the AFC more than halfway through the season, not having their entire running back room from 2020, an all-pro corner in Marcus Peters, an all-pro tackle in Ronnie Stanley, multiple other injuries across their offense and defense. And it was great. And then there have been 4 losses now out of their last 5 that have been by a combined 5 points. And a lot of it comes down to the 2-point conversion decisions, which I know Steelers fans are familiar with. That was where it started, was on that conversion where Jackson just barely missed Mark Andrews to waltz in for 2. But that was a loss. Cleveland, another 2-point decision, resulted. I'm not going to say resulted, but it was a key factor in a loss. And then you have the Packers, again, ends a game 2-point conversion. They don't get it, results in a loss. The Bengals, they get blown out, and the Bengals have been on fire this year and have gotten pretty lucky with injuries in their own right. And I mean, that's what happens. Sometimes it's just like the healthiest team wins. No disrespect to Cincinnati. I mean, I think they're an up-and-coming team that's done great this year, but they've been lucky with injuries. I know, in 2019, the Ravens had 2 major injuries the whole season. They went 14-2. So sometimes it happens that way. I know Pittsburgh's been beat up on the defensive front this season, a couple other areas. So it's stuff like that where I think the mood in Baltimore right now is I think people are just wondering how they got to the situation, even when a lot of people at the beginning of the season weren't expecting playoffs or were expecting maybe a wild card exit because of the injuries they already suffered. They put themselves in a position 8-3 to make the playoffs, and they just haven't been able to capitalize.
And like, who have they been? Like, who's been the center point of the blame, I guess, for the collapse? Losing 5 straight games. Are they upset with Harbaugh, going for 2 in 2 games where they could went to overtime and potentially won the game? I know analytics told Harbaugh to go for it and stuff, but what do you think about that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, the 2-point conversions have been have drawn a lot of criticism, definitely. But I think if you had to point out one player or coach that the majority, or at least the most Ravens fans are pointing direct, all right, fire him, it's Greg Roman. It's the offensive coordinator who has gotten a ton of flack over his course in he's not in a Ravens uniform, but his time on a Ravens staff. The kind of book on Greg Roman, and a lot of people have kind of pointed this out, is that he will have one great season and then stuff just falls off a cliff in terms of pass offense. He's a great run architect, has orchestrated some of the best run offenses in history, but you go back to his time in San Francisco with Colin Kaepernick or Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor. Both of those quarterbacks had one amazing season and then never really were able to get back to that point. And for Lamar Jackson, people look to his 2019 MVP season and they say, wow, 36 touchdowns, led the league in passing touchdowns, won the MVP. And then 2020, there was a clear step back, I think, both from execution and play calling perspectives. 2021, though, how much can my question is, how much can you gauge from an offense that has lost so much from an injury perspective and a COVID perspective and hasn't really had their full team? How much of that can you gauge without having your top 2 running backs, your MVP quarterback for a month of the season, no all-pro offensive tackle? Where I would put the blame is half play calling, half execution. The play calling, I think, has gotten worse over the course of the second half of the season. I thought Greg Roman did a good job with the first half of the season, but with personnel, you have to adjust your playbook. And then with execution, it hasn't been there sometimes. So a lot of people want to blame just execution, just play calling. I think it's a combination of both.
Okay, I was gonna say, so I do have some question. How about Lamar Jackson and his growth in the future? We're not talking. But how old is he? 24, 25?
He turned 25 today, yeah.
Tell him I didn't even know that. Who knew? But the point is, do you think they need to change course on offense as he's going to get his money, as in try to make him more of a pocket passer, evolve that way? Do you think it's time for them to do that? Or do you think they should still go with the same course as they did in 19 and 20? Right. I think it's about time. They have the weapons. They got the personnel, I think, now, so they can make it more of a spread offense, more of a spread passing, and utilize his strengths.
Right. I think as this team continues to evolve, they have you hit the nail on the head. You have the pass catching weapons now. So now their question to themselves has to be, how much do we trust Lamar Jackson as a passer? And I think they should trust him a lot because he's shown that he can throw from the pocket. He's a good pocket passer. He's not a perfect player. I mean, I think we still have to see a bit of improved deep ball accuracy, some decision making. I think with the way that Jackson was put in a situation this year with an offensive line that has been in shambles for most of the season outside of Bradley Bozeman and Kevin Zeitler, you have a running game that has not helped out a ton despite what the stats might say. Jackson has tried to play a bit of hero ball this season and trying to say, look, I need to do it all myself because I just don't have my guys out here with me outside of these receivers. And so it's resulted in him throwing interceptions where he should throw the ball away. He's throwing incompletions instead of taking obvious running lanes. He's running when there's a wide open receiver. So some of those decisions have been an issue for him, especially when he's been struggling. But what we've seen is a player, especially over the first part of the year, where in the pocket, when he has protection, the adequate protection to sit in there for 3-4 seconds and not be touched and kind of go through his progressions, he's been awesome. He's been great. So I think that the Ravens, they are still going to be a run-first offense. I think that relies on players like Dobbins and Edwards as well as Jackson. It is what has worked for them when they are healthy, and I think they should stick with it. But you cannot win a Super Bowl at the NFL level running 100 times and passing no times. You have to have balance. And I think that that's where the Ravens, they brought in a couple of really nice coaches in the offseason. T. Martin, Keith Williams. Williams has worked with players such as Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins on their NFL game as an individual coach, his coach at the college level. And he and T. Martin have been great for this organization. And I think we saw the evolution of the passing game, but we just haven't seen what this offense can truly be fully healthy. And it's the NFL. We're not going to see any offense fully healthy at any NFL point because injuries are a part of the game. But when the Ravens get their guys back, I think that they will be a balanced offense, but with still the predication on the run game, utilizing Jackson and his legs as well as his arm to continue to psych out NFL defenses and try to get the most out of this offense.
All right, one more question for me. One more question. All right, going back to let's move forward. Let's just say they don't make the playoffs. Now it's going to be draft time. We get to it. What do you think their biggest draft need is going to be this offseason?
There have been people clamoring for they have 10 projected draft picks this year. People are saying 10 offensive linemen. I think that's where people's minds are at right now. The Ravens have struggled with tackle depth over the course of the last couple of seasons, I'd say, in the Lamar Jackson era. And now it's shown. They don't have Ronnie Stanley. They traded away Orlando Brown. They need somebody who can step in at right tackle and be the long-term solution there. I mentioned Juwan James. Maybe he's a good stopgap option. Is a player who's been on the roster this season, but I don't think he's a long-term guy. There are also questions on the defensive front. Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, two guys who could potentially retire if the Ravens don't make the playoffs. And nobody's certain about that. And they're not certain about it, I don't think. But they could invest in a defensive lineman very early. I know Jordan Davis out of Georgia is a player that a lot of people might want on the Ravens. In the secondary, the Ravens could move on from Marcus Peters in the offseason. His contract number and the injury he's coming off of, there have been some questions as to what his future is. I think they should bring him back. But there have been some questions. Anthony Averett, who has stepped up as their number one corner for a big chunk of the year because of the injuries, he's a free agent and honestly could get a big money deal elsewhere. Deshaun Elliott, who they lost for the season midway through the year, is also a free agent. So they could draft a corner in the first round. There are a couple. I know Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati is a player that many want in a Baltimore uniform. Other than that, I could see them drafting a running back in the mid rounds just as insurance, so they don't have to go through what they went through with signing all these veterans very early in the season. Maybe a third tight end later in the draft. They've been trying to look for a guy to replace Hayden Hurst for a while. But if I had to pinpoint, I'd just say build the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, and then outside of that, probably some secondary help as well.
That's all. That's all you got, Brand, right?
That's all I got.
Okay. All right. Thanks for Kevin Oestreicher. Is that how, I hope I didn't butcher your name.
Yeah, you got it. Okay.
All right. I think he's from Locked On Ravens podcast. Kevin, what's your handle for that to share for our followers?
Yeah, my personal Twitter is at KOstreicher34, and the Locked On Ravens handle is just at Locked On Ravens.
So, Brandon, what's your prediction for the game? We'll cut straight to it.
Let's cut to it. Let's go. You got how me there. I've thought about it, but I've been hemming and hawing back and forth like I usually do. The Steelers make me do that. I think Ben had his nice send off at Pittsburgh last week. I guess I'm going to go with Baltimore here. I have no rhyme or reason to give you that, but it's going to be close. A classic Steelers-Raven rivalry. I wouldn't be surprised if Ben gets one last little drive. Boswell kicks a field goal. Matter of fact, that's what's going to happen. Matter of fact, I ended it all. I flipped it. I'm sorry. Old Yeller's going to get one last
one?
Yes.
You have a score?
2017.
Yeah, I think it's going to be low scoring. It's going to be – I don't think it's going to be pretty, just like the, last week's game against the Browns. Like, other than the Bengals, and they've had some moments where they – but once they're in stride, the Bengals are a pretty good team. But the rest of the AFC North has just been a mess this year. The Steelers, I don't know, Deontay Johnson coming off the COVID list is huge for them because their passing game is broken right now. And, the Ravens' pass defense isn't good, so that bodes well for Ben and everything. But I think the Ravens are going to stop. They're not going to let Najee go for 188, I don't think. No. So, the defense is really just good. They're going to have to sack Huntley and force turnovers to win this game, I think. But just the Steelers, they've lost 4 straight on the road, and they give up a lot of points, a lot of yards in those games. So I think they're going to struggle. Well, not struggle. They might struggle defending the run, but I think it'll be a tight game. And I won't say something weird score, like maybe not weird. I want to say I was going to say 19-17, but I'm going to go more like traditional way. I won't say 20-17. I won't pick Baltimore to win. So the Steelers will finish out 8-1. That's my prediction.
So we got that. So we both have the same score, but you have Baltimore. I have Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I didn't even know you. I didn't even hear that you had 27. Yeah, I think it's going to be in that range.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just do it that way. I have the Ravens winning. You have the Steelers.
By 3. Who do you think is going to be the reason why if the Steelers win?
I think Deontay Johnson. I think he could have a big game against that Ravens secondary. I would like Chase Claypool to step up, but man, he's been having a rough year this year. I don't know.
He's effing up my fantasy league.
Yeah.
Oh God, man. Yeah, the person I think is going to do it. I think if the Steelers are going to win, he may not need 188, but I think he might need 90. If he gets 90 yards, Najee Harris rushing, I think that will get the job done for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, the Steelers, they have to get those sacks. I don't know if they'll have 9 like last Monday night against the Browns, but I think they could. The Ravens have been struggling on the offensive line, leading the league in sacks allowed. Do you think T.J. Watt breaks the record? I think he gets it. I agree with Kevin. I think he'll get 2.
He'll get 2. You get 2.5.
2.5. Okay. And they can't use the excuse of the 17th game either because T.J. Watt's missed 2 games and he's left games early, like at least for 3.
Yeah, 3.
So, do you remember when Strahan broke the record? Brett Favre gave it to him.
I don't think it's going to be any of that, but I think he's going to.
Harbaugh's not going to do that now.
Oh, no. Especially with the playoffs on the line. So what do you think? How do you think this playoff picture is going to go down? Go. No.
I don't know the seeding. I don't have to look at it. But as far as it's going to come down to the Raiders, Chargers. That I think the Chargers are going to win though.
I think so too. I picked the Chargers to win that game. Hopefully, because I got the old Eckler Herbert that came through for me one time with a major comeback. I hope they do it again.
Yeah.
But we're both on the theory that the Jacksonville Jaguars are not going to come through for us.
Yeah, I'll be absolutely shocked. I think it'll take a miracle for that to happen. They just got to hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor, and they'll be all right. But so I want to wrap this up soon, just because we're at the 50 mark. So I was going to say I think the Steelers are going to lose. So Steelers, my prediction to start the season was 8-9. So if they finish 8-1, I'll have the same win total, but I didn't have it right as far as them having a losing season. Ian Tomlin's, NFL record to start his career with 15 non-losing seasons.
Yeah, I had him 9-8. I had between 8 and 9. So I'll just.
So we were pretty spot on there. We didn't see them being like a winning team or making the playoffs.
No.
And we didn't have them being either. We knew if Ben won last year, they would somehow, some way, at least get to that 5 or at least have a respectable record.
Yeah. Even though their point differential will come on, it's gonna be not good.
Yeah,
this is probably his worst team.
Worst since 1988 as of right now.
Yeah.
All right, so that'll do it for us here on this edition of the Renegade Blitz podcast. We'll have Ty Polk back on probably Sunday. We're gonna do it Sunday or Tuesday. We don't know when yet, but that's when we'll do the recap of the Steelers Ravens game. So until next time, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at @RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.